It was my colleague Karen Giannoni there in the township of Soweto, just outside Johannesburg, where, of course, Nelson Mandela once lived. Well, Nelson Mandela is not only the father of the modern South African nation, greatly loved by his people, he was also a giant on the African stage and, of course, also a global icon. We've heard much of his legacy since his death, but there are different aspects to this. I'll be assessing what his leadership meant at home in a moment. But first, let's talk to my colleague, Lebo Diseko from Focus on Africa. Now, Lebo, just listening to those young South Africans there talking to Karen, it is actually quite extraordinary how this rather elderly man, brought up by parents who are, after all, from the 19th century, still really is relevant to them.
Absolutely. And shortly before I came in to speak to you, I was speaking to two 15-year-olds and a 23-year-old. And what they were saying to me was that, you know, for them, I didn't expect them to have a sense of he brought us liberation or say the same kinds of things as my parents did, but they really did. And I remember saying to the 15-year-olds, but what does liberation mean to you, because you didn't live under apartheid? And they said to me, we see the scars of apartheid in the country every day.
But they also see the scars and hear about the scars of apartheid as you yourself did from your own parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to hear about that, but just want to ask you this. Do you think that when you have a generation of South Africans who don't hear the stories of the oppression and the discrimination from their own parents, that they might perhaps start seeing a different South Africa, not remembering Nelson Mandela in quite the same way?
Well, the one thing is that it's taught in schools, so it's part of their curriculum, learning about, you know, his contribution to the country. So I think there has been an effort to make sure that that is not forgotten.
And now your own parents were activists in the ANC and they had to flee for their lives from South Africa and they moved to the UK, where you spent the early part of your life. When they went back and relocated to South Africa, were they grateful to Nelson Mandela and what he'd achieved?
Do you know what? It's hard to put into words. When they left South Africa, they weren't people in their country, you know, and to go back, being able to, and to be able to take part in the process that led to us being a democratic country, to be able to, I remember them talking about queuing and queuing and queuing and queuing just to vote. You know, this opportunity to have a say in the country you were born in. You know, I remember my aunt telling me how they were not allowed to own property. They were not allowed to own land in their own country. And it's just, it's unbelievable. And the sort of, just how huge it was. So it's absolutely had changed when they went back, and I think it's absolutely changed for them now.
And as somebody like you who's lived in multicultural, multiracial Britain, where people can mix, obviously there's no apartheid, of course people still complain about discrimination and racism, but can we talk about South Africa even today in the same way that it really is multiracial? That, for example, if you have a mixed marriage, people aren't going to turn over their shoulders and have a look?
Look, you know, I think it's a work in progress. I mean, I know people that are in mixed marriages. There's members of my family that are in mixed marriages. There's friends of mine that are in mixed marriages. You know, there are.
And it's what's standard now? Is it quite commonplace, is it, in South Africa?
Look, I think it's obviously, there are obviously still scars that still have to heal, and I think that one thing you notice when you go back to South Africa is that the way that race is talked about is quite different from how it is over here, but it certainly is a progress, a work in progress, and I think that it's something that South Africans are very open about, and it's a discussion that they're having, and that can only be a positive thing.
I won't embarrass you by saying how old you are on air, Lebo, but I know you're relatively young, and obviously having been brought up in Europe, you have got friends from all different races and so on. But is that the same case for people your age in South Africa, or even younger still? Is there a true meeting of the races?
I think it depends on your background. I mean, there were many people my age who went to mixed schools, and so they have mixed. Certainly people younger than me are used to having, you know, friendships across the colour divide. I think maybe for people a bit older than me, it may be more difficult. But as I said, the country's kind of a work in progress, and it's a conversation that is had.
So the Rainbow Coalition is what we've been talking about here, which is part of Nelson Mandela's legacy, of course. Lebo, thank you very much indeed. Lebo Diseko, then my colleague. Now, when it comes to South Africa itself, Nelson Mandela's contribution is immense, perhaps even immeasurable, for averting a possible descent into civil war during that difficult path to democracy. To look at what his legacy means for South Africa in more detail, I'm joined now from Johannesburg by William Gumede, author of several highly acclaimed books about South Africa today. He also wrote the foreword to the collection of Nelson Mandela's writings and speeches. William Gumede, would you say that the overriding achievement of Nelson Mandela is he is often credited